The Thrift Savings Plan is your very first opportunity to begin building wealth in the military, and also the most passive. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to maximize your investments in the TSP, as well as how to avoid all the mistakes, or most of the mistakes, that service members commonly make. Now, I'm Dave, the military millionaire. I left the military 3 years ago, completely financially free, haven't had to take a job since, and the TSP is part of the way that I was able to do that. So let's dive in. All right, the very first piece of advice is just to start early and be consistent. So right off the bat, when you're at recruit training, they're gonna give you an opportunity to start investing in the Thrift Savings Plan, and you should take it. And I would say you should take it at a larger percentage than you might believe possible, and most likely than what other people are doing. And here's why. It is much easier to start with a big contribution, then realize, that was a little much, and shrink it so that you get more money in your paycheck, than it is to start with zero contribution and try to make that jump so that your paycheck shrinks when you were already spending the money that was coming out of your paycheck. So it is better to start with your paycheck being minimalized and your TSP being maximalized, and then shift than the other way around. Psychologically, it is harder to see your paycheck shrink over time because you're contributing more. And here's the deal, like, let's say you start off at 30% in your TSP, and so your paycheck isn't as big as your friends, whatever, you'll be fine. And then as time goes on, right, you get pay raises. You get pay raise the first, second, third, fourth year you're in, then every other year after that. You get a pay raise with every promotion. So you might get 6 pay raises in your first, 7 pay raises in your first 4 years. Every pay raise, let's say it's a 3% bump, you put 1 or 2% in your TSP, and you take 1 or 2% in your paycheck. So if you get an extra $30, you get 20 in your paycheck, 10 in the TSP, or 10 in the paycheck, 20 in the TSP, whatever. So your paycheck does incrementally go up, but you don't really notice the difference because you're still just taking a percentage out of your paycheck. And that's the way I would approach this. So I would say you start off at 20, 30, 40, 50%, whatever you think you can stomach. Do the math before you go to boot camp. And remember, you're going to have, especially that first few years when you're training, right? You're going to have free room and board, free chow, free medical, free dental, probably no need for a car. Like, your bills are going to be minimal. So, like, stuff the money in the TSP. Don't buy bullshit that you're going to have to throw in a sea bag and carry around that first couple years during training. Like, you don't need an Xbox One in your sea bag to drag around. Like, you'll be fine. So invest in the future, because those dollars invested early are worth infinitely more than the dollars invested later. And that's because, assuming a 7% annualized return, your money doubles every 10 years. So if you invested $100 a month when you're 18, if you didn't start until you're 28, you'd have to invest $200 a month for that money to equal the same in the long run, assuming 7% return, which is the annualized S&P 500 return over the last 60 years. It's actually creeped up a little bit since then. But so assuming 7%, we'll just use that for the basics of this. Every 10 years, your money doubles. 18 is the absolute best time, or 17 is the best time you can begin contributing to your TSP. So max out as much of it as you can. You'll thank me later. Number 2 is take full advantage of the matching contribution. So if you listen to that first part, you probably don't have to worry about this, but at least 5%, come on. The government will match up to 5% of your paycheck. That is a guaranteed 100% return on investment immediately the day that you contribute for 5% of your paycheck. You'd be an idiot not to take that. You're not going to get a 100% guaranteed return on day one backed by the government anywhere else. So take the matching contribution. At least contribute 5%. I'd say 10 should be your minimum the day you go to boot camp. And then honestly, I'd say 20, 30, 40, 50 if you can stomach it. But 10 should be your minimum. So you at least get the match. You get a little bit. There's a little bit of your paycheck every month. That is something that goes towards your future. Now remember, TSP is a long play. We'll talk about that. But this is not money you're going to be spending right away. This is long-term, setting yourself up for success. 3, choose the right funds. Now, when I joined, back in my day, the Thrift Savings Plan defaulted to G Fund, which is government-backed securities like bonds. And that is a surefire way to never lose money, but also not really see your account gain. In fact, it'll barely keep up with inflation. Now they start in a life cycle fund, which is a conglomerate of funds that adjusts over time. So it'll be way more aggressive now, and then as you get older and closer to retirement, it'll move more passively and less aggressive, and it'll put a larger chunk into G fund so that, if there's a crash when you retire, it's not going to be as detrimental to your account. That is a good option. If you don't know anything about index funds and TSP and anything else, life cycle is a good option. In fact, I would say probably just leave it there right at the beginning until you can research this stuff. A good book to read is The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. It's a great book on index funds in general, and it talks a little bit about the TSP. But what you should do is you should research the funds a little bit, and you should figure out like your ideal strategy based on your risk tolerance, like how aggressive you want to be and how old you are and your plan, right? You should figure all this out, make a decision, and then go from there. I wouldn't tell you to just do a one size fits all. So take this with a grain of salt. Personally, and I used to not even tell people this online, personally, I'm in 75% C fund, 25% S fund, and that's for the long term. When I get a little closer to retirement, I'll adjust it, a little bit less aggressive, probably put some in the G fund and whatever. And sometimes, there's an argument for international, but you have to, here's the thing. Don't go day trading your TSP. There's a Facebook group that talks about that. It's stupid. Just take your TSP, set it on something you believe in. The CS is basically like mirrors the S&P 500, and let it ride for a long time. Just don't touch it, because that is a good way to build wealth long term. You pick a strategy, you stick to it, you leave it, it'll compound over time. Don't mess with it all the time. But do your research, and if you don't do your research, just do the life cycle until you have done your research. Because life cycle, while admittedly not the best fund, it is better than you just randomly picking shit when you don't know what you're doing. Because it's a good, balanced fund. So do that. Do not just put all your money in the G fund, or you'll end up like me, where I contributed 10 to 20% for the first decade I was in the Marine Corps, and it wasn't until the 8-year mark that I realized, oh shit, my money's been in the G fund all this time, and no one told me any different. Well, between 2008 and 2015, when I realized that, the market skyrocketed, and I was earning like 2% returns. So I would have probably close to 3 times as much in the TSP right now had I known that. I mean, we're talking a multi-6-figure oopsie-doopsie because I left my money in the G fund. So don't be that guy. Number 4, this is the key with the TSP. Long-term. Leverage compound interest. Long-term. If you earn a 7% return on $1,000, that's $70. If you earn a 7% return on $100,000, that's $7,000. If you earn a 7% return on $1 million, that's $70,000. So if you look at these charts, they hockey puck. They're hockey stick, right? So they start off, you're not really getting much out of income, blah, 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 blah. And then over time, they do this. Like even Warren Buffett's net worth goes like this. And the reason for that is because those amounts compound. So that $7 on 1,000, that eventually, now let's say in year 1 you put $1,000 in, you earn 7%, you have $1,007. Next year you earn 7% on that second 1,000, so $7, plus 7% on the 1,007, so that's 14. Let's call it $15. So now you earn $15 on top of the 1,007 and the other 1,000. So now instead of 2,007, you're at 2,022, and that it just compounds, right? So then that next month or the next year, it is just a math game. They joke often that compound interest is the 7th wonder of the world or 8th wonder of the world. It really does work incredibly well. So, and I'll show you a little bit here in the future what this could look like. But all right, number 5, avoid the early withdrawals and loans. People are going to try to talk to you about loans all the time with your TSP. Just avoid it. I honestly was a beacon of just don't. And then when I got divorced and I had something go wrong with my property, I had to pull a loan. Ironically, I pulled the loan. I'm repaying the loan. And during that time, the reserves was like, it was just kind of a weird situation where I ended up not in the reserves anymore and I didn't even realize it. So it lapsed, and the day it lapsed, they foreclosed the loan, took the balance out, and I got slapped with, the penalty, the tax, and I have a smaller TSP, which sucks. Now, the loan itself wasn't the end of the world because I was repaying it and I used it for something that I knew would earn me a better return, but the timing was bad. It still screwed me, and I regret it. I regret having ever touched my TSP. Don't take loans from it unless you absolutely have to, and you know that you'll be able to repay plus interest, whatever. There is an argument to be made for the interest that you pay yourself and this, that, and the other, but the opportunity cost sucks. Don't take the money out unless it's an emergency or a like once in a lifetime investment that you are 100% sure will work. Like this is something you've been doing, not like, oh, I heard a snake oil guy tell me he could help my money. Don't go throw your TSP into insurance. Those guys suck if they try to talk you into insurance with, whole life insurance, infinite banking with your TSP. That's dumb. Just don't listen to them. That's a sham. Don't take loans out. Don't withdraw it. Don't pay the taxes on it. Just keep investing in it and let it ride long term. Once you're out of the military, don't roll it anywhere else. Just let it ride. The TSP is great. Number 6, readjust as needed. So reevaluate. So like I would go in once a year and rebalance my C and S fund contributions. So like let's say the S fund outperformed the C, and now I'm at like 70% and 30% instead of 75-25. I would rebalance to 75-25 like once a year. And I would maybe check my TSP every 6 months. Now, I honestly, I look at it every month to see what the balance is so I can calculate it for my net worth, but I'm not actually doing anything to it. Maybe once every 6 months adjust, but I would say really once a year is fine. Just adjust your contributions and reevaluate your plan to make sure that's still the percentage allocation you want to be at and go from there. All right, number 7, this is the biggest one. Just think long term. Be patient. Your TSP is not going to grow overnight. It's not going to become millionaire status overnight. It will in the long term. This is the power of compounding interest. Because again, if it doubles every 10 years at 7% interest, if you have $10,000, that means it turns $20,000. But then if you have $500,000, if you can just wait 10 more years, you'll have $1 million. If you have $1 million and you wait 10 more years, you have $2 million, right? So sounds like, oh yeah, no shit. But like realistically, patience is what makes this worthwhile, right? So be patient, don't touch it. So like, for example, if you had 7% annualized return assumption, if you started at age 25 and you were putting $500 a month in, which is $6,000 a year, if you stopped at age 45, you'd be around $400,000. And by the time you retired at 65, you'd be around $1 million, $2 million. Now, I did some math, and I'm going to just grab this off the back of this chart. Here's what it would look like if you really wanted to get to, like, let's call it that $2.1 million that I dropped in the title, right? Before I get started, I know this is going to sound unrealistic for that first part, but it's just the math. If you contributed $1,500 a month, which is $19,000 a year, which is under the maximum for the TSP. So like, let's say you deployed to a combat zone and you put a ton of your combat pay in there. This could realistically happen in that first 4 years. If you put $1,500 a month away in the TSP for that first 4 years, average, then by the time you reach 65, retirement age, it would be $2.1 million. Now, conversely, remember how I talked about the math, right? If you put $750 a month, so half of this in, and you didn't touch it till you were 75, so it doubled one extra time, then yeah, also 2.1. Math is mathing. Now, let's say that you don't just contribute for 4 years. So let's say you plan on doing 20, right? If you contribute, man, the math on this, it was $666 a month. But you're going to be an achiever because you don't want the devil's numbers. So $667 a month for 20 years, right? Again, that's like right at $8,000 a year. That is doable, especially because at the beginning you might be a little bit lower. At the end, you could be a lot higher, especially if there's any deployments in there. There's all these what ifs, right? But if you contributed $8,000 a year to your TSP for 20 years, then that would also be $2.1 million by the time you were done. Again, if you did half of that and then waited to 75 years, also 2.1. Now, I acknowledge that saying $1,500 a month or $19,000, which is like half your freaking salary in the first few years you're in the military for 4 years, is a daunting amount to put away. So do the math yourself. You don't need $2 million a year in your TSP, or you don't need $2 million in your TSP at 65 to set yourself up for success. Half of that would be fine. And again, there's all kinds of variables. If you did a 5-year enlistment, you invested for 5 years, that number would be different. All the numbers would be different if you did this. Like, so many different ways to skin this cat. The bottom line is this. The Thrift Savings Plan is an incredible tax-advantaged way to grow your wealth. And what it really does is the mental ability to now take bigger risks and bet on yourself. Because if you know that your thrift savings plan is going to be $1 million when you turn 65, which means that you could pull, they say 4% is what you can pull out annually to be like safe. Realistically, you could probably push 5 or 6% and be safe. But at 4%, your account will maintain and even still grow after you've pulled the money out. So that means you could live on $40,000 a year from your TSP, and it would still grow slowly, but grow over time. And that's a pretty healthy benefit when you factor 40 grand a year, tax exempt, plus whatever VA disability you got, maybe a pension from the military, whatever job you're working, like, that's nice. Hell, there are still places in the country you can live on $40,000 a year, especially if your house is paid off. So if you know that you're going to have $1 million or $2 million, which would be $80,000, right, in the bank at retirement, you just know it's just going to happen. You're going to let it ride. You did the math, like math is mathing. You average it out over the last 60 years, you'll be right around that mark. Then you can afford to take some bets right now because your retirement's already covered. So if you mess everything up right now, like, your retirement's covered. You're good long term. So, like, it's not as much of a risk. That's what I love about the TSP. It's like, I know that no matter what, my future is secured. If I mess something up in my real estate, that sucks short term, but long term, I'm okay. It's like right now I'm putting money away for my kid, and I'm going to start an IRA for him. And that's even better because at 7, 8 years old, that compounds, that'll double an extra time before he's even 65. And so my goal is to have his retirement covered by the time that he's 18. No, he doesn't even need to worry about it, right? His retirement's good. Live now. Enjoy the present. Make memories. Have experiences. Do the things. So that's the hope, right? So hope this video helped. Realistically, like, if you were to have done this video all the way down, it would be pick a fund, like a strategy in a fund, invest as much as you can afford to invest consistently early on, and then let it ride. TSP is really easy. Don't overcomplicate it. If you got something out of this, please subscribe, share it with a friend, comment. Let me know what questions you have. Happy to help, and love you guys. Have a great day.